we actually we took your topic, and one thing you'll notice on our YouTube channel is one of our most popular videos is Jacob's video on teaching D&D gamers how to use ChatGPT to generate. So
may as well have some fun.
Yeah, and we have a very AI assisted, but I think impressive outline. So
okay, cool. Love it.
Yeah.
We can...
Welcome to the Business, Litigation, and Intellectual Property Podcast, or BLIP. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Shawn McBride. He's a seasoned business lawyer with over 2 decades of experience in the field. He started his career in some of the largest law firms in the United States, and he transitioned from big law to set up his own law firm, Shawn McBride Law Firm, PLLC. Shawn isn't just an attorney, but he's also a licensed CPA in multiple states, which brings a pretty rare and valuable combination of legal and financial expertise to his clients. He's also an accomplished speaker and author. He's shared his expertise on a variety of platforms, helping entrepreneurs and business owners to avoid common pitfalls and build companies. And today, Shawn is joining us to talk about expanding business opportunities, new states and new countries. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Shawn, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming out. Say hello.
Hello, everybody. Looking forward to this. This is always fun to have these conversations. And I'm hoping whoever's listening, hopefully maybe inspire some new thoughts, still new possibilities, both personally and professionally, to open up new doors.
And we should probably mention that intro was Jacob Tingen of Tingen Law. I'm Travis Richmond, and we'll be talking with Shawn today.
Yeah. So why did you pick this topic of expanding business opportunities, new states and new countries?
You know, it's something I'm seeing more and more of. It's been throughout my career. I've worked on a lot of national and international deals. We were talking before we recorded, I've moved throughout the U.S. I've lived in several different regions. I am seeing more and more business owners posting questions about, how do I go from state A to state B? How do I transition my business? What do I have to do to structure or restructure? Or actually, in some cases, if we get into some of the technical stuff, maybe you don't have to do much to move states. People think it's a big deal, but maybe it's not. But then I also see a lot of international possibilities. And over the years, I've worked a lot of cross-border capital raise, companies moving from one country, accessing capital markets here in the U.S., and I think that's something we're probably going to start to see more of again. We kind of had that weird period here with the pandemic and all, where everybody kind of went back to their region again. But I think I expect as things start to reopen, some people are going to shift. We've seen a lot of shifts here in the U.S. between states. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a lot of people start shifting between countries here in the coming years.
So that's interesting. And why do you think? I mean, obviously, so we're an immigration law firm, and so we understand how difficult it can be to transition to new countries. What do you think is going to make this possible? I mean, there's digital nomad visas, but what do you see that's going to really bring this about?
Yeah, the digital nomad visas are there. They're starting to become more common. They at least give people maybe a possibility of doing a trial period or checking something out for a while. I think, the capital flows, obviously, there's a number of countries that want more money. So, some of the island countries, some of the European countries, maybe they're, not as high on the tier as far as wealth, or looking to bring in investment capital and money. So I think the countries are hungry for it. But I think the other thing I'm starting to see is I've seen people shopping within the U.S. to get to the state that they want to get to, personality style, tax style, et cetera. So I've seen that shopping going on. And I'm starting to hear more and more rumblings about people starting to do the same thing internationally. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated to move internationally because of the immigration and regulatory issues. But people are starting to now think about transitioning, moving their business, going to where they want to be. And I'm starting to see, hints of this popping up on the international front as well.
Cool.
Shawn, just say all of that one more time.
All of it?
How far back you want to record? No, I'm joking. So I have a question. Yeah, I have a question for you, Shawn, that's not totally related to what you gave, but a little bit of your background that I think is really interesting and maybe tangentially related, which is you are licensed in, can you tell us all the states you're licensed in? You've got law licenses and then CPA licenses. And then maybe talk about how that's positioned you to uniquely to help businesses expand.
Yeah, it's a long list. So 16 U.S. states and D.C., including a lot of the major markets. So, a lot of it's big markets: New York, Georgia, Florida, Texas, California, Colorado, Illinois. So basically, that's been part of my movement and my growth of my client base. And then I have CPA licenses: Florida, Maryland, Texas. And what has happened is, as my law firm has evolved, I started out as a big law firms, and I spent the first 10 years of my career with huge law firms. And it wasn't as much of an issue because as we had clients in different states and different state law issues coming up, I would just grab somebody in the law firm who would then help me on the matter. We could deal with any of the licensing issues. When I started in a law firm, what I saw was, you get a lot of clients that are crossing state lines on transactions and issues. And so, I'm kind of more of the conservative bend. So I said, hey, let's get the appropriate licenses. And so what it reflects is both a little bit of my movement. I've lived in a couple different markets throughout my career. So a couple licenses to show where I've been having offices or my primary presence. But a lot of it has been driven by clients. Clients have a need here or there, and then I had a law license so that I can service them. Corporate law is somewhat similar across the states. I mean, there are some differences as far as the nuances of what happens in each state. But the good thing about my practice area is, even though it's a state law function, a lot of it looks similar. So we can jump into different states and work through the issues. But as part of expanding a business is figuring out where you need to be. And sometimes that's a move. And I've helped a number of clients over the years move from state A to state B and reestablish their operations. So my licenses just kind of reflect that, I have clients spread throughout the U.S.
Thanks. And as maybe a follow-up to that, how's your CPA qualification also helped you, positioned uniquely?
Yeah, I don't actually do what a CPA does. I mean, the main thing the CPA license allows you to do is do an audit and then issue an opinion. I've never issued an opinion on somebody's financial statements. That's something you would usually hire a large accounting firm to do. But the credential is there. I do the continuing education to keep it active. And I use my CPA knowledge a lot. So while I'm not actually doing the function of a CPA, I'm not in auditing financial statements or taking positions on people's books and records or other things that a CPA would typically do. I am constantly looking at financial statements, analyzing what's going on, figuring out where things are going. Some of my matters tend to be a little more financial heavy as a law firm and as a practitioner. So, securities offerings, there's always, financial statements involved in that and financial disclosure. So being a CPA, I understand that at a deeper level. Sometimes I get brought in as an expert on stuff. I have a couple litigation matters where I've been brought in where there were alleged fraudulent transfers. Basically, somebody transferred money out of a company to try to avoid paying a litigation judgment or a potential judgment. And so I've had to go in and look at people's financial statements, look at their various companies and subsidiaries, look at transfers, look at income statements, and figure out where the money went and how they, moved clients and customers between one company and another and made distributions and, trace all that back to show that it really wasn't a business deal. It was an attempt to avoid a litigation judgment. So I've done that a couple of times in my career. So the financial stuff just keeps coming back to what I do. And of course, businesses are driven by their income and financials. So it's always there. So I just think clients tend to pick me, and I tend to end up working on stuff that has that kind of extra financial component where we need to really look at what's going on with the business and the money. And, having that deeper knowledge helps me explain that stuff and work with people on it.
Very cool. I wanted to ask real quick, what made you, maybe you can just kind of give us a rundown of your actual, a verbal resume. What made you switch from big law to small law? When did you get the CPA versus the law degree? And then why did you decide to kind of pursue this blend of skill sets and expertise?
Yeah, so I started out, I left high school and I was good at math and I liked business. So people are like, you should be an accountant. That's really how I ended up in the CPA track. Was just kind of generic, and I liked it. And it was always, I enjoyed business, and I enjoyed going to account, doing the accounting stuff and studying how accounting and business interface. So that's how I started. Then I went immediately from undergrad to law school. I actually took a couple days off from law school and took the CPA exam. I did not study very heavily for the CPA exam. I passed it on the first try, which is extremely rare. I'm an old. To those of you who don't know, I'm old relative to some people. Back when I took the CPA exam, you had to take all 4 parts in 2 days. So morning, afternoon. Nowadays, you can split it up: study for one section, take it; study for one section, take it; study. I had to take all 4 parts in 2 days. So I went and sat in I took it in Maryland. I sat in an exhibition hall at the fairgrounds and spent 2 days filling out, bubbles and then writing essays, and somehow passed the exam the first try, which back then I think the pass rate for first timers was like 10% or something. Barely passed one section.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Barely passed one section, but went back to law school, finished up my law school, and immediately started looking for business law firms. While I was in law school, most people, I think, who have a little knowledge of the legal industry know you often get aligned with bigger firms early in your law firm career. And then if everything keeps going well, you end up there, and that's exactly what happened. I started out with Delaware's largest law firm. Great law firm, got really deep in some very complex and stuff on Delaware LLCs primarily, a little bit of corporations. Got to that point in my career, I started thinking, okay, where am I at? Where am I headed? I was 4 or 5 years in. I had to make a choice. Like either I could spend the rest of my career in Delaware and move from Delaware firm to Delaware firm, or I could make a bigger move. And so I just said, okay, I want to open up career opportunities. I want to get involved in, more than just Delaware law specialty. And so I jumped to a national/international firm in Washington, D.C., and I was already doing a fair amount of international stuff. I started doing more international stuff. Then the Great Recession, or whatever they called it, back in 2007, 2008 hit. That law firm and a couple other law firms went under that year. So I had just changed law firms a year prior. Law firm I was on in Washington, D.C. went under. I got immediately recruited to another law firm in Dallas. And so that's how I moved from DC to Dallas, literally over Thanksgiving weekend. Like the job offer came in, I think the Wednesday before. No, the job offer came in the Friday before Thanksgiving. I accepted on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then I was at my new office in Dallas the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Across the country over the course of a weekend with a job offer I had received less than a week prior, or about a week prior.
That's crazy.
That was a crazy time. I entered, so I had graduated from law school just about that time. And I remember there were firms in Dallas, some dissolving and then others just gobbling up their attorneys. So,
and I was sitting at that point. So the law firm I was at was going out of business. I had one large client that wanted to go with me wherever I was going to go. I had several interviews. I was interviewing, I was back in Delaware interviewing. I was in New York interviewing, Dallas obviously interviewing, talking to some firms in some other cities. Crazy period. But anyway, so I ended up with that Dallas offer, immediately moved to Dallas. The other option was if I didn't get the job offer and lost the client, I was going to go backpacking in Europe for 6 months or something. It's like, hey, if job offer doesn't come in, I've got savings, I'm not in a bad spot, I'll just go to Europe and backpack for a while. So I ended up in Dallas, spent a couple more years. Yeah, about the same. About the same as backpacking in Europe. So I ended up there, spent a couple years in a large law firm there. A lot of people were coming and going from that law firm. And so I asked people, I said, are you happy with your career? Do you like what you're doing in big law? And a lot of them were like, no, I just got to move to another firm. I got to keep paying my bills, or I got a mortgage, or whatever the reason was. They were basically just going to stay and stick it out. But very few of the people I really interviewed. I was senior enough at that point I could get real conversations with people. I was about 10 years into practicing at that point, so people really talked to me and open up. And so I was like, okay, I can stay on this hamster wheel and keep going, or I can start my own law firm. And so I jumped down and started my own law firm. And, went and met with a guy at a coffee shop, told him I was about to leave the big law firm and start my own law firm. And he said I was crazy and I would never have any clients. And I walked across the street from that meeting to a lunch meeting, and the guy was like, "Oh, you're leaving the big law firm. I've got a deal for you. This is a guy I've been like trying to get to be my client for 50 years."
That's amazing.
He signed up with me prior to me starting my law firm, he was ready to sign up right after I walked out of the meeting where the other guy said I would never have any clients leaving the big law firm. So it was like juxtaposition. Awesome. Started my own law firm, and that was about 10 years ago. And so, I've grown and changed my law firm over the years, but it was just time for a change, and most people in the big law firms are sticking it out. I mean, the money's nice. They get paid well. There are some advantages being big law firms, but by and large, most of the people I talk to in the big law firms are not particularly happy with their balance of life. And so, I wanted something a little different.
Let me ask you about that. Can you compare your kind of work-life balance from big law to opening your own firm and running your own practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a game changer. Big thing is I get to say no, and you'll hear people talk about this, but in the big law firm, you work with whatever client they tell you to work with, and if that client is mean, if they're abusive, if they don't treat you well or whatever, you're stuck with them. You go into the smaller law firm world, and you have to do the work to hustle your own clients and things, but ultimately you get to say yes or no. And there's a lot of people I in one way, shape, or form say no to, right? I mean, they don't value my expertise, they don't listen to me, they don't want to work cooperatively. These are people I'll just say no to. Or if they're a little bit, I try to run a very clean shop. So, if the client starts getting a little bit shady about how they're doing things, I don't necessarily want to work with their business, right? And there's clients that I'll part from as I go. And so I get to pick who I work with, and I get to pick how I work too, right? So I still work a lot of hours, but it's picking and choosing who I work with, and it's projects I want to work on and the people I actually want to help and care about.
Can I jump in with a quick question for you?
Sure.
I think it's fun. You mentioned you get to pick your own hours. I had a friend who's also a fellow business owner sent me a meme. It was the great thing about being a business owner is I get to pick which 16 hours a day I work, which is pretty great.
There's some truth to that.
No, but what I was going to ask is, I definitely understand what you're talking about, especially when it comes to saying no to clients, which is one of those things that you have to learn. And so what has your experience been like learning how to do that? What's the criteria you use? How did you learn, and what do you do now today?
Yeah, it's definitely a learning process. I'd never say I'm 100% got it down, but I know a lot better now. I just know the nature of the business. I know the nature of the personality. A lot of law firms give free consults, which is something that I don't really do per se. What I talk about when I talk about having a get to know you meeting. So I'll do a free get to know you meeting. We're not necessarily going to talk about all the details. I'm not going to sit there and start analyzing your legal issues in a get to know you meeting, but I'll sit down with a potential client and hey, what are you doing here? Where are you trying to go? What's your business look like? What issues are you dealing with? And we're really talking about, who we are and how we work and vision of the company and where the business is headed. And I'll from there I pick, right? And if I find somebody who, let's say, is just very short term, let's put out each fire every day, and move to the next fire. I don't want that client, I want a client who wants to fix things, that wants to build a long-term structure, that wants to protect themselves. I don't want to be called into a bunch of meetings and depositions about, why my client did something wrongful, even though we got our attorney-client privilege and, all that's protected. But, I don't want to be part of, something that's crazy. Now, one of my clients right now that's kept me very busy this year is a turnaround. That's a different story, right? I've got a management team. I like them. They're trying to fix things. They've got a lot of historical problems from the prior management team. I don't mind fixing problems and cleaning things up, but we're moving to a better and better situation, right? That's a client I want to work with. a client who just keeps constantly having problems and then calling me up and saying, oh, here's this tax bill I haven't paid for 15 years and now they're after me. I mean, literally, there's some out there like that, I tend to like clients that keep clean books and records, that, care about their business, that are attentive to it, and we're working on making it better and better moving into the future, maybe planning an exit, planning a growth strategy. That's the kind of clients I work with, and I could probably make a lot of money dealing with the people who keep causing problems because they create a lot of legal bills.
But that's not the goal necessarily.
Right. I want to be using my time, energy, and their money that they're paying me to be moving to a positive future rather than just, trying to keep bailing water. So that's one of the things I look for. What is the attitude of the CEO or leadership team? Where are we going with the business? How are we going? And so it just creates a lot of alignment. I mean, I'm happy when my clients call me, right? They've got an issue. We're working through it. We're fixing problems. Very rarely do I dread a client call. The only times I don't like client calls is, like the Friday afternoon dump, right? Where they maybe we're working on a deal and the other side dumps everything on a Friday afternoon, and then suddenly we've got to figure out what to do with it over the weekend. That's somewhat unavoidable because that's just part of the law practice. But
right.
I certainly wouldn't like a client that, would just have that attitude of, hey, I'm going to get everything ready for the lawyer on Friday and expect it to have them back to me on Monday. I would not keep that as a client for a long term. Right. I pick and choose now. I mean, and part of it is enough people know me in the world. I get on shows like this. I have my own show. A lot of people just know me from the business world. A lot of people call me up 5-10 years after they saw me give a speech, or I worked with them on a company 3 years ago. They went somewhere else. Now they need legal help. The phone rings enough now that I get to pick and choose. I don't have to take everything that comes in.
And you get to look back and that person who told you, well, you'll never get clients was not accurate, right?
Right, exactly.
Now, you're speaking my language.
First time I was leaving a big law firm, first person I tell that I'm leaving the big law firm, like in a business meeting, tells me I'm not that I'm making a big mistake and I'll never get clients because all they care about is the big law firm. And then go across the street to somebody who I've been courting at the big law firm wouldn't hire me at the big law firm immediately wants to hire me. So you quickly start learning what the truth is, and it's not necessarily just what the naysayers say.
Now, do you have when you vet these clients, because I think this is an interesting process, you call it a get to know you meeting, but
Yep.
To vet them the way you're talking about, and this is where you're speaking my language, which is you want a business that's organized or cares about being or getting organized, right? So that they can avoid some of these fires and problems. How do you do that? What questions do you ask to vet them to make sure that, okay, this is a good fit? Because I don't like dealing with fires. Like you said, they generate a lot of legal bills, but not necessarily the client you want.
Right. And they're not, and of course, then they view you as an expense rather than being an investment. Right. And that's part of where I want to be the investment side of the ledger. You're paying me to help you make something better that's going to be more valuable in the future, going to provide you retirement income, going to provide you a big payday when you sell, going to grow the company, whatever. I want to be an investment, not an expense. A lot of it's just asking them, like, what is your vision for this company? Where is this going? What are you trying to do? And then part of it too is like, what legal issues do you have? Is the legal issue, hey, we want you to come in and help us work with, putting together documentation so we can raise money and grow the company? Or is the legal issue, hey, we got another person chasing us because we didn't pay this employee for a couple of years and now they want to sue us, right? Which issue am I dealing with, right? And just learning what issues do they frequently have in their business makes a big difference. I mean, usually, of course, with most lawyers, I guess, usually there's a particular problem when a client shows up. A client's not going to show up just to say, hey, everything's great, and I want a lawyer. I mean, I've had a couple times where maybe like their previous lawyer's retiring and now they need a new lawyer, so they're out interviewing a couple potential lawyers. I mean, I've seen it once or twice. Most of the time when people are talking to a lawyer, they got a problem. But what's the problem you got right now? And is this a recurring problem or is this a one-time problem? And what are we dealing with here? So I learn a lot just from kind of that conversation back and forth. And, what's your business like? What are you trying to do? Where are you headed? Those types of things tell me a ton about who I want to work with and who I don't.
What are the kind of common pitfalls that you see businesses making and ways to help them avoid those?
Well, a lot of them view, and a lot of them view legal as just being, kind of a have to do or side job or extra paperwork or something. And to some extent it is. A lot of it's compliance and regulatory related, but it's actually an opportunity too to do things the right way. The corporation laws, you have a board of directors that runs the business. And in many ways, that's a beautiful thing when it's functioning correctly, right? You actually have a board meeting, they're knowledgeable about the business, they're discussing options, they're voting for what's best for the business. It really has a beauty to it when it's done correctly. But versus, the people who view it as, oh, well, I have to have a board meeting, I got to show the state that in case I get sued someday, I got to have a board meeting once a year, right? Well, that's the wrong attitude, right? The right attitude is, how can we do this and use this to make our business better and stronger? How can we start laying the foundation to grow? How can we look at maybe organizing our business to go into new states or new countries or wherever we want to go and plant those seeds of growth, right? That's fun to me versus just, okay, let's have another board meeting because we have to.
So how do clients normally come to you when there are, I'm kind of getting the hint that you just don't take on disorganized clients, but one of my questions is, how do you help a client see that, hey, some of these corporate requirements they're not just government regulation to burden your business and make your life terrible. They're helps to help you develop a structure that will give you a springboard to growth. And if you do this right, and that's where you come in as a consultant, I presume. But how do you explain that to a client if you need to win them over a little bit?
Well, that's really the conversation we're having, right? So they've showed up at my doorstep for some reason. Some of the clients, show up because they got some transaction they need to do, right? I need to go out and raise money now, or I need to, I'm doing an asset sale. I'm selling part or all of my business, or, they got some current issue. Mm-hmm. That's kind of one class, right? And, do we want to work together on that issue? But as we get into the deeper, longer term relationship, it's really understanding their philosophy of, do I really care about building processes in the business and making it function better and making it into a growing enterprise? Or am I just trying to get through the day every day? You learn that very quickly in these meetings when you sit down with people and get to know them, right? What is your philosophy, right? Are you just trying to check boxes and say you did it? Or are you really actually caring about this process? I guess it's not something you can ask somebody directly most of the time because they're not going to give you an honest answer. But if you ask enough different ways and have that conversation, you're going to start figuring out whether they actually care about the business and want to do things the right way and see that all the paperwork, documentation, putting things in order is, a long-term benefit versus somebody who's just trying to get by each day.
So on that topic, on the organizational topic, is the organization of the document something you do for the clients, or do you kind of butt into their existing organizational system? And then transition to our larger topic, which is expanding to new countries, new states. It's really hard to do that without a groundwork of organization and structure, right? So kind of speak to that.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, particularly, you guys know on the immigration side, you're going to get a ton of questions, right? So, and I don't necessarily do immigration. I do the business structuring side of it. Usually, somebody else will be brought in on the immigration. Maybe we'll get to work on some of that in the future, right? But we look to bring the right people in on that. But what I'm typically doing, it depends on the client, but I am helping them build the structure. Now, for some of my clients, they want me to carry out the structure, right? I had one of my clients basically had an internal person who was dealing with legal issues, and then there was, problems. And so they're like, hey, can you take over this? And so I'm kind of functioning in that role, at least temporarily, to help them clean things up, fix problems, do an assessment, get things reorganized. A lot of my clients, what I'm doing is I'm building an ongoing system with them, right? As we're working together, we are categorizing things, documenting things, putting processes in place, and moving it forward. So I think part of that's just my personality and style is I want things to get cleaner and neater over time. So as I'm working with these clients, I'm like, how do we get things structured? How do we put things in order? how do we, build out our filing system and make sure we have everything. One of my clients years ago, and we spent. When one of my clients comes up for sale, occasionally, somebody will be ready to sell the business and transition out. I like to go through and organize things before the sale hits, right? And so, my client gives me a heads up. We're looking to potentially sell. Hopefully, we're getting 3 to 5 years notice if we can. Not always practical, but if we can, if somebody's looking to retire or transition, 3 to 5 years is great. But man, we want to start getting everything in order and start. I know, give or take, what questions a buyer is going to ask, right? They're going to send us what they call a due diligence checklist. They're going to ask for a bunch of documents. I don't know exactly what order that due diligence checklist is going to be in, but I can give you 95% certainty what's going to be in that due diligence checklist because, we've been through it enough times. And so in a perfect world, I've got a client who's already got everything already filed, either primarily electronically, maybe paper, but everything's ready to go. And so when the buyer says, hey, give me all this stuff, bam, within a day or two, here's everything you asked for. And that, I've had buyers tell us after deals like, hey, we felt good doing a deal with you. We were more confident. We were more ready to close, maybe pay a higher price because they knew
the paperwork was in order.
Yeah, they're not worrying about what's missing. What gotchas are hiding out there. What are we going to have to face post closing that we don't know about? Because when you have everything in order and organized, it gives the buyer a lot of confidence.
2 days from due diligence to giving that information over, that's huge. That's a really big deal. You should be proud of that. You probably are.
Yeah, well, it's just something you work on for years and you're ready, right? When you have enough time to prepare in advance, right? Now, obviously, I do have clients that, maybe they haven't been my client. They call me up and, somebody just referred them to me because they're getting ready to sell. Well, now we're going to start cleaning up as soon as we get working, but we didn't have that time to prepare. But yeah, it impresses a buyer when you can turn that due diligence quickly, right? When you can say, hey, here's everything you asked for. If you've got your files in order and the due diligence checklist comes in, literally all you need to do is sort things into the right folders that the buyer's looking for. You're not scrambling like, oh, where's that contract with our vendor from 5 years ago? You've already got it, right? You can run yourself through the due diligence process today. And,
right.
I wish more companies would do that, right? Even if you're not up for sale right now, it costs you some money. It's going to take some time. But if you are afraid, if you suspect there might be issues with your books and records, you could put yourself through a due diligence process right now, work with your staff, clean everything up right now, and then you're ready to go if you get an unexpected offer or something pops up in the future.
Right. That's something that I will sometimes tell clients is a lot of business owners, I think, were trained to think, this compliance thing is a burden, that kind of thing. Where in reality, if I'll sometimes tell clients, like sometimes clients think lawyers cost money, but really your lack of organization is costing you money right now. Like, let me help you with that. I want to circle back to one of the things, which is you mentioned vetting clients. And then when you talk about a complex business, there's more than just the one person. There's the CEO you talk to or whatever you might. But then what if you get to a board where the CEO presents things and you're like, I can work with this person, but you get into the company and there's a board that's just, you're like, I cannot do this. What do you do in those situations? How do you deal with that? And then have you ever explained to a board, like, look, we've got to do this if we're going to expand our business to a new state, to a new country?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
You're always dealing with a variety of personalities and styles. What's interesting to me, is, several of my clients have, just internal conflict issues that are structural and, meaning that maybe they have a board member that's, in there for some reason that's staying, or an investor where they just don't agree. They don't see face to face. Again, I think organization and process helps a lot there. To get the let's go back to how a board is supposed to function in a classical sense, right? A board's supposed to get information. They're supposed to know what's going on in the business. They're supposed to debate and consider, and they're supposed to vote on what direction to take the business. If we can get back to doing that, even if we have disagreement within the board, we're moving the right direction. We've had to enforce that sometimes. If we have maybe Maybe somebody invested in the company and they're no longer happy, but they got a board seat. We got to face that reality. We got to work with it, right? And so, again, that same documentation, the same process helps a lot. Maybe the person's disgruntled, and I've had this experience. Maybe they're not happy, but if their lawyer sees that we're dotting I's and crossing T's and doing things the right way, they have a hard time complaining about it. Because they can see that, okay, well, maybe this minority investor who's upset with the company is losing the votes, but they see they can't really complain because everything's being done the right way. And again, that's where this kind of system and documentation and process can fix a lot of problems because it just shows that everything's being done the right way. So I've had that over my career. We have discussions. We have tough decisions to make in these businesses. We have, deals where we, aren't getting the terms we thought we would get, and negotiation twists a different way than we thought it would. Maybe the other side has a lawyer. I'm thinking about a recent deal right now. Maybe the other side has a lawyer who just doesn't understand some of the issues. I can't tell the other side to go get a different lawyer, right? But I have to work with it, But that then forces me and the company decision makers to take on some extra burdens, right? Because we got to work through the fact that the other lawyer doesn't understand what's going on fully,
right.
So, but we just work through each situation. But again, structure, process, I think all helps, calm that stuff and make it more procedural and less personal.
For sure. Absolutely.
How soon after you started your own practice did you start doing these get to know you meetings? Is that something you did at the big firms, or is it something you discovered? I need to do this to protect my time and get the kind of clients I want in my own practice.
It was an evolution. I'd say it took a couple of years out of the box before I figured it out. I know law firms of all different sizes, and I know it varies by practice area, but there's always this debate in the attorney forums and stuff. Should I give a free consult or not? Maybe clients are just going to come in, ask a bunch of questions, get a free hour, and then go to the next lawyer. And I've seen that. I mean, I've had potential clients call up, and we end up and I move towards this get to know you meeting as I've learned. But even with the get to know you meeting, I've had clients come in, they're asking very, very sophisticated questions, and and they understand the deal and the deal structure and stuff. And I'm like, you've met with 3 or 4 lawyers, and each time you've improved your deal structure, and you're here to improve your deal structure again before you go to the next lawyer, right? So I've actually seen potential clients use the shopping process, and every lawyer gives them a little feedback, and they make it a little better. And if I'm late in the chain, I can see what they're doing, right? But it took that learning process of doing that. I mean, and corporate wise, I mean, the issues are so complex and so deep. I really just don't know how you can really do much in a free consult. I mean, an hour to really get to know a company, I mean, maybe you have a specific question about Delaware law. Can I do this? Can I do that? How do I, paper this transaction or something? That might get done in an hour. But I just started learning, the free consult wasn't the answer. It wasn't generating the types of clients I want. I want a relationship with my clients. I want to work with them over a long period of time. I want to work with the right personality style. So I just started figuring out, hey, having a consult where somebody comes in and we sit in a conference room and we start burning through their deal didn't build the right relationship, and it didn't answer the questions that needed to be answered. Sometimes you would start working with somebody, then find out that they weren't the right style or personality for you guys to be working together. So it was just testing and evolution. So it took me a couple of years after I started my law firm to figure that out.
How long are those meetings?
It depends. It depends on the company and style. At one point, I tried all kind of different stuff. I went to a lot of different business consultants and workshops and stuff. At one point, I think I had on my webpage, we would do a 19-minute get to know you meeting. So the idea was 19
and a half minutes.
Unusual number, people will be interested in this. What is this?
Why 19 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, why 19 minutes? Oh, I can assess everything I need to assess in 19 minutes or whatever. I experiment with different stuff. I'd say, Most of the time it's an hour. I usually ask people to block an hour. Of course, some of this get to know you is done by email too these days, or phone. I mean, we get a phone conversation, 10, 15 minutes on the phone, and then it's like, do we need to have an hour conversation? Now, sometimes, I don't even get to that point, right? I mean, I can figure out a 15-minute conversation that we're not headed there. So, but if I think it's a real potential client that we might be doing real work with over years, giving an hour of my time away to avoid a problem down the road or transitioning a file or whatever the case would be, good investment. But I just kind of, I personally view it in stages, right? Like, hey, first we're going to email back and forth, have a phone call, and then go from there. I mean, if I get the email from somebody, and I get these occasionally, sometimes it's spammers, but sometimes it's real people like, hey, I'm doing M&A and I need to sell my business and it's this much assets and this is the deal and here's the structure and what's your fee quote? Probably not my client,
Right.
Because they just sent the same email to 20 other lawyers and they're just looking for the lowest number they can get, right? They don't care if they get quality advice. They're not going to distinguish about whether the lawyer's asking the right questions, protecting them from post-closing liabilities and making sure everything's done correctly, right? They're not even worried about that. They just want the lowest number that gets emailed back to them. I'm not even getting into that game.
Well, and a lot of those emails are scams too, like you mentioned. Like it doesn't take long in the practice of law to get some of these things and be like, well, this isn't for real. So
yeah, some of them are scams, but no, I think some of the ones I sense are real. It's like actually just some business owner that's shopping it, right? They view this as a commodity, right? Like, what's the lowest number I can get somebody to put their law firm name on this for?
You've spotted my method when I'm shopping for car advice.
Exactly.
I've gone to 10 different shops, and now I know the lingo because the first shop I talked to, I don't know what to ask.
I've done it with you. I've done it with cars. Particularly you're buying a new car, man. To me it's a commodity, right? I mean, if you know what make, model, features you want, etc. Years ago I did this for my parents. They wanted to buy a car. They asked my father. I'm like, what do you want? Got a list, and then I contacted a bunch of dealers. Yeah. Got a price from each of them, and it's like, okay, buy the cheapest one, right? Well, you don't care which dealer it comes from. Who cares? Yeah, that changed my. It was an evolution, but I had kind of the standard thing when I started my own law firm. That frustration of just spinning your wheels and wasted energy, and a lot of turnover. I guess early in my first couple of years, I didn't know how to pick my clients, so he'd come in, and later we'd start figuring out that we didn't have personality alignment or whatever. I had a guy come in here and he had me negotiate a contract. I wrote the contract for him, put the provisions in that he wanted. He's like, great, I'm going off. He gets it signed. And then a couple weeks later, something shifted in his relationship with the other guy. And I'm like, he's like, what do I do now? I'm like, well, you signed the contract. The contract said blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, I've got the only copy of that contract. I can just destroy it. And I'm like, we're done. I'm like, we're done.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in like on this get to know you. Are you getting to know like the business only, or like the person? Like, how much time do you spend just talking to them about?
That's a good question.
Like, do you like to fish? Do you like to play guitar?
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get into like the super personal stuff. I don't get into like how do you necessarily. Where do you travel? What are your hobbies? I don't really ask that, but I do get into like, what's going on in your business? What's your plans for it? Are you stressed out? Do you enjoy your business? What do you want to do next? Do you want to grow your team? Do you want to spend more time in your business? Do you want to sell at some point? So they're kind of business questions that touch on the personal. I mean,
there's a good book you should look at reading.
Wait. No, don't
Sorry,
say
what
it.
was that?
I want to guess.
Guess, Travis.
I want 10 points for the book you're going to recommend.
What is it?
The Checklist Manifesto.
No, that's not the one.
Ah, dang it.
Although the Checklist Manifesto is a great book. You should absolutely read.
Yeah.
Do you know the Checklist Manifesto?
Yes.
Oh, because you were taught. That's another thing. I didn't want to spring it on you because you might just go, no, I don't know it, Travis. And I'm like, okay,
it's an excellent business book. No,
but it seems like very much
Yeah. Checklist Manifesto definitely is jam. No, the book that I was going to recommend is called, I forget who wrote it. Let's look it up really quick, but it's called Lie Spotting.
Okay.
And I found this book after a bad business deal that I personally got involved in, and then terrible partner on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I just remember reading this book. It's by Pamela Meyer. And just the approach, I mean, some of it's bogus, right? Like you can't tell people are lying with some things, but it's a way to structure thinking about who you're talking to that I think is really helpful. And it's one that I wish that I'd read early on, because you realize like, hey, I don't need this person in my career. Like I can be done.
Right.
Move on. It's an excellent book.
Yeah.
But,
I said it I've said it. I've always thought I should have spent more time studying psychology.
For what every lawyer needs is psychology. Hey, so also I'm curious about the kind of makeup of your clients. Do your clients tend to fall into a specific industry, or are they just kind of spread out across industries and they more issue focused?
Issue focused, yes. So my practice is issue focused, so it's not industry focused. I have a variety of industries, which is good because it minimizes some of the conflicts. But yeah, I'm focused on board, capital raise, partnerships, mergers. So I pick very specific corporate issues that I'm good at. I don't necessarily pick industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you pick, and are you, when you talk about these issues, you mentioned, for example, boards, do you deal more with like just board structure and organization, or how much of your time do you spend managing personalities? Because I know you mentioned, as many lawyers do, I should have studied psychology, right? But like, it can be difficult working with a board sometimes.
It can. Like I say, most of them have had alignment. A couple of them I've had one or two rogues. That's the most common situation, is I've got one or two that are just not in alignment. Most of the time, my clients have had boards with like shared visions, so they all pretty much want the same thing. Again, there might be one or two oddballs where they got there because, they a minority investor and voted them in, or they bought 15% of the shares 20 years ago and then got in a fight with the CEO, and now they're not friends with each other, but they still own the same company. I got a couple of those, but most of the personality stuff I deal with is the negotiations. Who should I work with? Who should I not work with? How do I manage the clients? Even my clients I get along with, there's still an element of how do we interface with each other? How do we manage this relationship? How do we make it work longer term? So I'm always thinking about those types of issues. Yeah. How do we communicate with each other? How do we lay the right foundation so we can work together for a long period of time?
I keep thinking of people that they could definitely use your help. So you're top of mind when that comes around. Yeah. So listening to you, listening to you today, the thought that keeps going through my head is you are a perfect mentor, I think, for a young solo corporate attorney. Kind of do's and don'ts. Like, you'd be the perfect person to talk to about how to vet clients. And how to shape the practice that they want. Have you had that opportunity? Have you had young attorneys come to you that have started their practice? And what's your advice to those types of attorneys?
I've taught a few young attorneys in the law firm world. When I was at the big law firms, that was a role I often took on, was teaching the young lawyers how to do deals and how to document stuff and how to draft documents and manage files and stuff. That was a role I took on many times in the big law firms. My philosophy always was, at that point, was, I've told people this, is train somebody to replace you. So my idea was, if I have somebody working for me, I want to train them to take my job, because I'm going to the next rung in the ladder, right? I need my time back so that I can move up the ladder. And I've always had that philosophy when I work with people. Haven't got to do as much at the law firm world, just haven't made that right pairing. I'm certainly at the point now where, things are busy enough. I'm at the point where, do I add another person to the law firm, or what do I do? Or do I get even more selective and expensive? I got to make those. I'm working on that. But I like working with up and coming lawyers. It's just a matter of getting the right fit, right personality. Again, that's a long-term relationship too. I'd really like to find the right person to work with on that. It hasn't happened at this point. It's kind of one of the things where I'm not looking or not pushing, but if it happens, I think it would be great. So open to it. But I mean, I haven't done it as much as a small law firm owner as I used to do it as, a attorney in big law firms. I used to always train a lot of the younger people that work with me. I would train and develop.
That's a great question, Travis. And thank you, Shawn, for your answers. I mean, this is all good stuff.
It's something I haven't thought about for years, so it's fun.
I'm just going to throw it out there. We'll put a little YouTube short. Shawn McBride is looking for somebody to mentor.
There you go.
There you go. There you go.
So glad you came to BLIP.
Yep.
I wanted to ask, so I guess our original intent, if we want to, kind of change topics to it, expanding to new countries, like at what point does a business decide to do that? What do they need to do it well? And then, since we talked about it before we got on, what are you thinking about as you considered perhaps an international transition, and what considerations are you looking at?
Yeah, no, I think part of it depends on your company and your business. So, where are you, what are you selling? I mean, have you saturated your market? Is international the right choice? I mean, some companies, are quickly forced into international plays, right? I mean, you look at a lot of the app companies, a lot of the tech companies, the way you grow is you move throughout the whole world quickly. Some other companies, local service businesses, you don't necessarily need to move internationally. You can just grow piece by piece by piece, region by region. So a lot of it depends on your business. Not a client of mine, but, just pops in my head. I met with a guy the other day. He's, basically an import-export guy, right? He's got a product from, halfway around the world. He has now moved to the U.S., cleared whatever paperwork he needs to clear. He's now setting up shop here. He's got partners back in the home country, and he's moving product into the U.S. and he's found a market here in the U.S. that wants the product that he's bringing in from home country. There's opportunities like that. I used to see a lot of, and I think we're going to see more of in the coming, weeks, months, years, of businesses that are looking across international for partnerships and relationships to either raise money or to get specialized knowledge or things. So I see that as a coming trend. The U.S., changing market, changing world here. U.S. has long had a philosophy of, we're kind of the big market, we're the big economy, play by our rules. Honestly, I'm starting to see more and more, international people not as wild about that. Some Americans aren't wild about that. We got a new whole Corporate Transparency Act coming, which is going to start requiring, primarily medium and small companies to report, ownership information to the government. It's going to be another change to the relationship of business. First time the federal government's kind of stepping into this area. So I just see changing styles and philosophies going on. And so I think this is going to start making people think international. And I've seen people move states. I've moved states. I've worked with a lot of clients that have moved states. I have to wonder if the next piece of it is people start saying, hey, do I want to move international, right? Do I want to look at opportunities somewhere else? And I expect that's going to be a growing trend with businesses, people just saying, hey, I didn't have to stay in California. I moved my business to Texas or Florida. And I've been working with those people for years, right? People moving from California to Texas was, I worked with several of them. California to Florida. Well, if you move California to Florida, what keeps you moving Florida to Puerto Rico or Florida to, somewhere in the Caribbean islands? Once that chain gets started, you start asking a question: why don't I just, go to the next best opportunity, or how can I structure even better than just staying within this one country? And so, that opens a whole world of opportunities that I don't think most people have thought about much or are just starting to think about. But there is a whole world of opportunity to say, how can I even optimize this business even more than just picking the best state or the best market? How can I pick the best country or the best region of the world?
Have you seen certain countries that clients are attracted to?
Well, I think it depends on what they're looking for, right? It depends on the size of the client too. When I was at the big law firms, it was, big countries, right? Obviously, Ireland's done a lot in Europe to get that structure going and to set up their taxation system to where people want to do business in Ireland. So Ireland's kind of like the one of the big international choices if you want to get into the European market. So we see that as well. A lot of it depends on just really what the person's trying to do with their market. I mean, you can make some plays to try to lower your global taxation, particularly if you're an online business. I've seen people doing that. Hey, let me pick the best country and I'm going to go here to minimize my taxes. And if I structure it right, I can avoid a lot of taxation. Not illegally, not evasion, avoidance, right? I mean, you're allowed to avoid taxes. That's perfectly legal to plan and structure. You just can't file false forms and lie about it, right? As long as you're telling the truth and you're building it legally, you can do it. So there's nothing wrong with that. So people are starting to ask those questions. So it just depends on the company, the business. And some countries notably are more regulatory friendly than others, right? So a lot of the big industrialized countries, they have big money, they play with bigger dollars, but they tend to have more regulations. So you got to figure out what's right for your business.
So you mentioned that, more and more people are going to be looking at this. And of course, large multinationals have been a thing for obviously long time. But it seems that you're saying that a lot of these medium and small businesses are looking at this. If you're a medium or small business, are there any countries that stand out to you in particular as like wise choices for any particular reason, regulatory environment, taxes, those kinds of things? And then do you have partners or do you need to find partners in these countries?
Yeah, I mean, I've done this in the big law firm world a lot. So I know some people in some of these countries and parts of the world. Smaller businesses, I do think this is just an emerging trend. I mean, some have already done it. For Americans, and I've had a couple conversations with this and looked at this for a couple of people. Puerto Rico is a huge play for Americans, right? Some people say it's the only tax haven for Americans. In some ways, it's true.
We actually just spoke to a client, to a friend this morning whose business was in Puerto Rico, who'd relocated in 2017. So it's kind of fun that you mentioned that.
Oh yeah, I mean, because Puerto Rico is a possession and the way they've got the tax law written. I mean, you can basically it's the only place in the world a U.S. citizen can basically opt out of the U.S. tax system, right? Because the way the system works is if you're in Puerto Rico, you're then subject to their system. Whereas for American citizens and let you go anywhere else in the world, you're still subject to the U.S. tax system. So it's a very unusual deal. And we've looked at that for people, and I've met with some folks on the Puerto Rico structure. So I think that's something for Americans to look at as well. From there, it's, what fits best. If you've got an online business and you don't need a lot of local services, you just need a good internet connection. I mean, I've seen people using Colombia, using the islands, different places like that. So, again, you've got to do an analysis. But, I'm really at this point where I'm like, okay, this is coming. I'm just seeing enough chatter about it. I tend to be pretty good about predicting things. I was well ahead of the inflation. I was well ahead of some of this pushback we saw in the last 3 to 4 years. I'm pretty good at seeing trends before they happen. And, I'm just starting to see enough chatter around this. I think it's going to become a thing that's going to be more popular, again, with the small, medium business. Large businesses have been playing this game for years. I mean, worked for or with a lot of Fortune 500 companies at different times in my life, and they were already on this 50 years ago, right? Before I was born, they were on this stuff. But now I think the small businesses, people are starting to question it and say, hey, where do I go? How can I make things more optimal?
Do you have advice for U.S. attorneys who help business clients for preparing for this kind of change?
Well, I think you need to look at how does this fit in their plan? And, so some ways it's no different than what I do with my current clients, which is, where are you at? Where are you headed? What do you want to do? And, I've had a lot of clients over the years ask things about changing, their state. Can I move from this state to this state and get rid of my taxes? And I've given advice on that over the years. I mean, it's easy and it's not easy to change your states. I mean, you need to make some real changes, right? Because some states with state income tax are very aggressive. and they want to see you actually move, right? And a lot of people just want to be like, well, I'll just go to a low or no tax state, and I'll just get a driver's license and put different license plates on my car, and I won't pay the state income. No. It doesn't work like that, right? You're going to actually have to, move and get some physical presence in the other place and do the tests and the structuring. But I've had a lot of people inquired about that over the years. So I think, for a business lawyer that's working with clients, this is a perfect bolt-on analysis as well. It adds a lot of complexity because, obviously U.S. is under the federal Constitution. People have the right to move between states under the Constitution. Things become a lot simpler. There's federal laws about who can tax what, particularly with pensions and other things. So there's a lot more uniformity when you're doing it domestically, but I think there's a whole new tier of opportunity to start doing it internationally. And so I think it's a perfect bolt-on for the business lawyer that's looking to help their clients even more and really open up more doors and service their clients better.
Cool. No, I mean, it really is amazing that the world seems to be getting smaller every day. To think about small and mid-sized businesses, chattering about this, like you said, 50 years ago, would be almost impossible to make it work. But because of the internet, because of just a number of things, this is becoming more and more possible for more people every day.
Well, you can physically be in a lot of places and be connected through the internet, right? I mean, you don't have to necessarily be near your operations to have good control and oversight over it, right? So it does open a whole range of possibilities. I think the internet is a big piece of this, and I think the shutdowns, the fact that everybody got forced to use technology more the last couple of years is opening some of these doors too.
Pretty cool. Well, we're excited to see what the future brings, and we want to thank you for coming to our podcast. Shawn, it's been a pleasure. I hope we do get to work on some immigration or business issues in the future. It'd be fun.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. Do you have anything that we should plug in particular? We've got your website pulled up here. It's rsmlawpllc.com. Are there any other places that people should look to hunt you down online?
That's great. My 2 YouTube channels. I got the Future Done Right show, which is my business YouTube channel, and then the R. Shawn McBride Law Firm, which is my legal channel.
Cool. Well, thank you again for visiting with us. Thank you for talking about these issues. It's really neat just to kind of consider where things can go. And Shawn, thanks for coming on to BLIP. We enjoyed having you. Appreciate it very, very much.